Greetings, everyone. Steve, Paracords of Kindness. How are you doing today? Hopefully your weaving's been happy. Okay, what I've got for you today is I'm going to show you how to set up a 2-strand core with a double cow hitch on a 5/8 inch buckle. This is going to be the Paracordologist cut, the extended version with the added bonus tips and tricks. If you want to see the simple quick cut version, I'll share the link in the description below. For those who know me, they know that I like to talk and I like to explain why I do things the way I do it. Not only how to do it, but why I do it the way I do, in hopes that others can learn from experience, the experience I have. Not that I'm the best, not that I'm an expert, but I have learned a thing or two. Like the commercials say, we know a thing or two because we've seen a thing or two. But with that said, let's get started. Okay, I'll say this. Some of this information I've probably covered in some of my other videos that are in the tips and tricks playlist, which this one will be added into that playlist, and it'll be added into setting up core strand playlist, a separate playlist. But for anybody who's wanting to learn not just how to make a bracelet, but how to make a bracelet, I would recommend checking out the tips and trick playlist and or the setting up core strands playlist. But with that, let's get into it. Let's see. Where do I start? What would I say first? First, I'll say this. I most often use a 5/8 inch buckle. That's what I've got set up today for the demonstration. 5/8 inch buckle. It's very rare that I use a 1/2 inch buckle. It's even rarer and that I use a 3/8 inch buckle. And the reason is, I'll tell you the reason, and then I'll show you something. When I first started doing this, I used a couple of 3/8 inch buckles and made some bracelets for my wife. And I let her wear them, and I asked her input. And she said, I don't like the buckle. I said, why? What's wrong with the buckle? She said it's so small, it was hard to manipulate, meaning to open and close it. And I'm like, yes, I feel the same way, right? And it's the same way with a 1/2 inch buckle. And I know a lot of people, when they start off, they use a 1/2 inch buckle. And I'll explain to you why I personally don't like those. Take it, leave it, do what you will with it. But like I say all the time, neat, clean, and tight. Neat, clean, and tight. We want our work to look neat, clean, and tight. That way it is more presentable. Because if your bracelets don't look good, nobody's going to want to buy them. Right? Okay, now, with that said, a 5/8 inch buckle with a double cow hitch. The reason is because when you set up that double cow hitch, you're going to have 4 strands running through this slot. And it's going to take up the entire bit of the slot. You'll see some people, you could do a 2-strand core with a single cow hitch. But what you end up having is this little bit of slop, or slack, if you will. And that's not tight. Remember, neat, clean, and tight. That's not tight, in my opinion. And that is why I don't use a single cow hitch. Right? And the same thing with the 1/2 inch buckle. They're hard to manipulate. When I say that, I mean to actually open and close the thing. Right? And you can't put a double cow hitch onto a 1/2 inch buckle anyway. It's too much in there. So, you find a happy medium between the size of the buckle, or in truth, the size of the slot in relation to the number of cords going through it and how many core strands you have. Does that make sense? See, I personally don't like that. I want it to be as tight as I can get it. So I will do, even if it is a 2-strand core, I'm going to set it up as a double cow hitch on a bigger buckle. a 5/8 buckle in this case. Now, with all that said, let it begin. Now, I've seen a lot of people do this, and I've watched a lot of videos and read a lot of stuff, and this is the way I do it. It seems to be the easiest for me. Now, it may not be the easiest for you, but this just seems to work really easy in setting it up. I've seen some people that do this, and they'll start, obviously you start at the bottom. Start at the bottom of your jig, and yes, I've made my own jig. If anybody's wondering, I made it. That's why this slot is all crazy looking like it is. But you start at the bottom, and I've seen some people, they'll take one end of the cord and they'll run it and they'll weave it all the way through, whatever. And it's hard to get your two working ends even. And that's why I don't do it that way. That's why I do it the way I'm about to show you. Okay, now like I said, some of this information is probably going to be a repeat from some of the other videos, because I like to talk and tell people not only how to do something, but why I'm doing it. Okay, take our cord. I simply got, a length of white cord today. First thing, I'll say this too. Me personally, I have my jig set up to where the buckle at the top is the female. Therefore, the buckle at the bottom is the male. So when I weave my bracelets, the top of them, where I start weaving, is always going to be the male end. And I'll show you why I do this in just a second. Something I've learned from experience, right? So we're going to put this back in here. But this bottom end that we're going to actually start, for the most part, most bracelets, when you go to set up your cord strands, you start on this bottom end. Now, there's a few that you attach up here and weave it back and forth. But for the most part, you start at the bottom of your jig, and I prefer to start on the female end. The reason being is because I have found that on most buckles, no matter where you get them, metal buckles, plastic buckles, it does not matter. The style of the buckle, the material the buckle is made out of, where you purchase, none of it. None of that matters. But a general rule across the board is that the female end of the buckle, the slot for the female end of a buckle, is narrower this way. I don't mean like this, I mean this way. It's usually a tighter squeeze than it is for the male end of the buckle. Let's see. Perhaps I can show you right here. You see how it doesn't quite want to go through? Now, I can get it through there, no problem, but there is some resistance, right? Let's look at the male end. It goes right through without resistance. Perfect example of what I'm talking about. Now, there's a reason. I'll show you. That way you can deal with the ends of your cord where you have snipped and singed them. I'll say this. When you go to snip and singe your ends, always, this tip I've learned. Take your fingers and just run across it to see if it's smooth. Sometimes you don't get it snipped and singed the best way, and they'll have a snag or a burr or a hard spot or something like that. You want to fix that before you start anything. See if it's got anything. Now check the other end. These are okay. Alright? That's the first thing. Now, we're going to do this. 2-strand core, double cow hitch. Starting at the bottom on a 5/8 inch buckle. Because on a 5/8 inch buckle, the 4 strands going through the slot will take up the room in that slot perfectly. How we're going to do this? We're going to start at the bottom. We're going to take our 2 ends, have them even in our hand, and we're going to go down through the slot. We're going to pull them out. We're going to take this back end, mindful of twist. We always want to be mindful of twist. That's something that should become second nature. Mindful of twist. Now, we see what we got going on here. We take this in, we open it up, and we run these two cords through here. We just pull them through. Now we just sort of pull it up. We don't want to cinch it down tight yet, but we snug it up. Now, we take our ends, and we run our finger down them. Remember, keeping the left on the left and the right on the right. We run them down to the end, and we make sure that our ends are even. Now, if they're not even, here, I'll show you this. Just for the sake of this video, I'll make them where they're not going to be completely even. Okay, I'll show you again. We don't cinch it down. We just snug it up, and we grab our fingers, and we just pull the cords, keeping the left on the left and the right on the right. And when you get to the end, and make sure you're pulling the cords evenly. You get to the end and see how they're not even? All you do is even the cords up, and then you run your finger back down. Now, I would highly recommend washing your hands. A lot of people have never thought about it, especially if you're working with bright or white colors. Wash your hands first so you don't have a bunch of oil, grease, dirt, whatever on your hands. I know some people use gloves. I don't like using gloves. I just keep my hands clean. But you see, now, they're uneven. Simple remedy. Reach under here. You grab this loop, the hitch. Okay, let's separate it so you can see it. And just pull this out. Kind of even it up a little bit. And then pull it, snug it down. Again. Whoop. Again, making sure we're even. Right? Okay, now, come back to this end. We're going to separate our cords out. We'll do the left side first. Find the end of your left cord. And we're going to come from the bottom up through the slot. We're going to pull the slack out. Mindful of the twist. See, there's a twist right there where my hand is. Mindful of that twist. Work that twist out. And this loop that has been formed, we run our cord through this loop. Pull the slack out. And we pull it up. Now see, it's got a twist in it right here. We want to get that twist out. Make it look neat and clean. And the more you do this, the more experience you gain, you'll know which way you need to twist your cord to get that twist to come out. It's just experience. Right? We kind of pull that one tight. Now on the other end, we do the same thing. We find the end of the right strand. Remember what I said, the slot down here is narrower this way. So this side, the second one you go to put in here, you might struggle with it. And plus, you're going to have to push everything over to get this to go through. Sometimes this can be, a little frustrating, but if you work at it, you get it in there. If you can get it started, you can I know it's hard to see, you can kind of wiggle it, and you can get it up in there just enough that you can get the top up with your finger. Now, we pull, hang on. We pull it, and just like on the other one, we take this end, and we go down through this loop, and we pull it. Mindful of the twists. And on these 5/8" buckles, here, let me zoom in just a bit, and you can see what I'm about to show you here. On these 5/8" buckles, when you do a double cow hitch, this loop, it has a tendency to want to come down here. And I've had people ask me, why don't you use a bigger buckle? It's because I want all four. I'll show you in just a second. But you just kind of keep it up here like this. Pull it. And, you know, you just use your finger and push it up so it's not around the edge of the buckle, right? But if we look, we see all four strands are laying in there flat and completely take up that space. And there's no room for them to slide back and forth like this one was. We don't have that. We have neat, clean, and tight. Now, if you look, you see how this, you got 1, 2, 3, 4 cords. This third cord looks like it's sitting up a little bit higher. You can fix that. Just take it, give it a little tug. Now, see how they're all laying flat and even across there, and it takes up the space entirely. This is why I use a double cow hitch, 2-strand core, but I put it on a 5/8" buckle because it takes up that slot entirely. And it keeps it neat, clean, and tight. But that's what we want. We want neat, clean, and tight. Okay, let me back out, and I'll show you the setup on the top of this. Pull the jig back down. Get the tool out of the way so our cords don't get snagged. I'll say this too. Here's your one. When you're working, now I'll be honest, my desk, which you can't see outside of the camera view, there's stuff everywhere. I've got bracelets and cords and tools. I got stuff laying everywhere. But I kind of try to keep it neat so the video is a little bit more presentable. Okay, now, what we do here, since we got it all set up, let's verify that our cords are still even. So we're going to just do it again. I do this quite often when I'm setting up my cord strand. They're relatively even. Correct? Good enough. Now, to do the top section, we're going to take those 2 strands and we're going to go down through the slot. Right? Now, we'll separate our cords. We'll split the core. And we're going to take these two, the working ends, and pull them up. Mindful of the twist. So we got a twist right here. Mindful of the twist. Usually they'll work themselves out. Alright? Okay, now, I'll say this. I'm going to separate these 2 ends. For this, I've already got this measured out. When you go to do all this, what I'll sometimes do, you can do it at this point, which is probably easier. But I do keep a length of cord to do what I'm about to show you. You can use this, or you can do it with the strands like I'm showing you. Whichever way you find to be easier. But once you get to this point, this is where you start to measure your bracelet. Now, we all know somebody's wrist is so many inches. You've got to add to that when you calculate and put it on the jig. So the actual measurement of the bracelet is going to be larger than their wrist. I'm not teaching you how to do that today. I'm simply saying we're going to set this up. Let's say, for an example, our finished bracelet, no matter the wrist size, our finished bracelet is going to be 6 inches. Now, we all know you measure from where the 2 buckles connect. You don't measure the prongs on the female or the male end. You measure where this buckle would meet against this buckle. That's the beginning measuring point. From that to the same spot on the bottom one. right? And like I say, we want our total length of our bracelet, no matter the wrist size, because the add to from the wrist measurement to what you're making the bracelet length is going to vary depending on the bracelet weave. The add to measurement, as I call it, is going to vary depending on the nature of the weave, right? We're not dealing with that. We're simply dealing with, I want a 6-inch bracelet, okay? So we pull these core strings. If you grab them, if you look right here, like I said, they come from here, and it goes through the top of the buckle and comes down, and then we've pulled them up through the center. But if you grab them down here on the bottom and take out the slack in your actual core strands, let's get all this out of the way so we can see. And grab, you'll see how the core strands tighten up, okay? We kind of got everything tight. Now, you don't have to pull it extremely tight. Just pull it so there's no slack in it. This is where you would measure. And I simply lay my ruler up here. Don't use this stuff down here. I know jigs always have these markings. These are for something else. They'll say 6, 7. No, don't use them. Never use them to do what I'm about to do. You actually measure every single bracelet from where the two buckles meet, the male and the female end meet here, to where the male and the female end meet here. So, like I said, we want a 6-inch bracelet. Okay, right there, I know you guys can't see it very well, but I've got just under 6 inches. I got about 5 5/8 to 5 3/4 inches. Okay? If you don't know how to work in fractions and read a tape measure, that's something that you will have to learn to do this. Right? And that's just under, that's the key. It's just under, it's just less than the length that I want the total bracelet to be. Makes sense? And I'll show you why in a second. Especially, this is for me anyway. And for most people, if you're using a jig. If you don't have a jig, I suggest buying you one. Obviously, I told you I made mine. But we pull these tight, okay? Now, we got it set up relatively the same length we want it, just slightly shorter, right? Okay, now, we're going to do again. We're going to take the left side. We're going to come over to the buckle, and we're going to come from the bottom underneath through the slot, pulling it up. And this loop that's being formed, we're going to, here, let's string it down so you can see. We're going to go through the loop and pull. Now, we don't pull it completely tight yet. We leave enough room. The way that I grab these two underneath cords to pull it taut to get the measurement, that's what we're going to do in just a second. Watch. Now, we do the other side. We take our right strand. We kind of push everything to the side to give us room, and we come up from underneath through the slot, pulling out the slot, and we take that in and we run it down through this loop, and we pull the slot. Okay, now here's the part. This is the key part. We reach under here. Now I know. Let's see if I can back this up just a little bit. I'm going to zoom in. Hopefully you can see what I'm about to do. Okay, I'm going to separate everything. Okay, we're going to reach under here. And we're going to grab those same two strands I grabbed a moment ago. So here's our core strings coming from the bottom. They come up and they go down through the slot and they go back. And that's what I'm grabbing. Where they go down through that slot, that's what I'm grabbing. You'll see that it's two core strands. When I pull these cords down here, these two core strands will tighten up. All right? Now, we're going to pull these. This is where you put a little bit of pressure on it. You pull them. Now, I always reach up here, my thumb and my forefinger, and I'll pinch right there to keep these tight. Now, they don't have to be extremely tight, but you want them tight. We're gonna get it real tight in a second. But we pull that, and we pinch on those two strands only. And then we take this one, and what we're doing is we're going to tighten up this hitch. And we're going to pull this up. Now remember, we were set at about 6/4 of an inch, or 5 3/4 of an inch. There we go, 5 3/4 of an inch. So we're going to need, when we adjust this, we got to make it to 6, and that's 1/4 of an inch. So the more you do this, the more experience you gain. You'll know instinctively how much to do this. But you pull this up, you kind of tighten it up, and what I always do, I'm going to back out just a drop. I'll take this strand in my hand so I can pull it, but I'll use my thumb and my forefinger on this hitch to kind of roll it around, pushing it up with my thumb and rolling it. That way it'll get the slack out, and as I'm pulling here, it works all the slack out and up and around and back through to the working end. Does that make sense? That's all we're doing here. You're just kind of working it and getting the slack out. Now, it doesn't have to be extremely tight. Why? You'll see in a second. Now, we do it again. Come back. We grab that strand that's on the bottom. We pull it, tighten it up, and we pinch it, like I said. Your thumb and your forefinger, just pinching that side if you can get a hold of it, if I can get my fingers on it. We're going to take this. I'm going to pull out that slide. When we get up here to the top, again, we're going to grab it with our hands. And we're going to use our thumb to push the hitch up, and our forefinger to get it where we want it, all the while pulling that slack out. Makes sense? Now, if we look at it, it's relatively even. This one on this side is not completely even, but all we got to do is kind of work it a little bit, and they'll all flatten out. Okay, now, see how we got them relatively tight, but nothing's going to move. When I go to adjust my jig and get that extra 1/4 inch in there, it's going to tighten everything up. And this is not going to slip and come back through. Makes sense? This right here locks it in place. Right? Now I'm going to zoom out and I'll show you. Now my jig, like I said, I have built my jig and to fit my purposes. Now some people have different styles of jigs and it won't work quite the way mine is. But I'll say this like I've said to all people. The spine of the jig, if you can actually see right here, it extends down about 10 more inches in this direction. And I'm sitting at a desk and I'm in a chair. And I put the lower end. Maybe I can get this on camera. Don't know. Ooh, snap. Hang on just a second. We had technical difficulties here. What in the world is going on here? Oh. This is definitely not good. Excuse me, folks. my computer monitor about fell off the back end of my desk. Okay. That'll work for right now. Let me get this out of the way. See if I can show you what I'm talking about. Yeah. Now here's the end of it. Hopefully you can see that. But what I'll do, here's the locking screw. Now I've got this is a wing nut and it's embedded in this piece of wood so this wing nut does not move. That way I don't have to hold this with one hand. But I'll flip this up on its side and there's a screw right here. And I'll take my screwdriver. Alright. What I do is since this wing nut is embedded in this piece of wood, I don't have to worry about holding this as I'm trying to turn this screw with the other hand. This hand is free to grab the carriage, the sliding part of my jig, and pull it towards me as the end of this piece is butted up against this end of this piece is butted into my chest breastplate. I even have a piece of pipe insulation to put on the end of this. Here, let's turn this around and I'll show you what I'm talking about. I'll put a piece of pipe insulation on here. So there's a little bit of cushion between the end of this piece of wood and my chest. Because I put this into my chest, and that's what I use to hold it when I do what I'm about to show you what I'm going to do. But we put it in here, and we already measured it, right? We said we needed about 1/4 of an inch. That is where these come in. That's why they're on the side of my jig, because I can see right here how much I need to move it to get that extra 1/4 inch into that. Does that make sense? Like I said, I designed this jig to specifically meet my needs. Not all jigs are like this, but this is the way I do it. What I'll do, hopefully, this cheap plastic buckle will not give under the pressure. I don't mean it breaking. I mean the actual clasp part not holding together. What I'll do is I'll set it up here and I grab a hold of my carriage. I'll loosen up this screw down here. And then you can see right here. I'll pull this thing to me. Like I said, the end of this spine toward me is in my chest. And I'll pull this. You can hear the creaking of this thing. I put some pressure on it. Hence why I made this jig like this. This thing is a heavy-duty stout jig. It's not going to grab. It's not going to break. Buckle's going to give before this jig does. Now, we flip it back on its side. It's like a guitar string. Bing, bing, bing. It's tight. Goes back to neat, clean, and tight. That's the way we want it. Now, granted, when you do that and you put all that pressure, these buckles, you see how it gets offset and off center? I try to slide it back even, both the top and the bottom, to get them completely centered. That way everything's perfectly in line. And then I come back now and I make sure the measurement is correct. Whoop, turn the ruler around the correct way. 6 1/8 inch. And what were we going for? 6 inches. And in my book, that's close enough. And remember, when you're doing this, I would rather it be an inch over the length I was going for, as opposed to, or 1/8 of an inch over the length I was going for, instead of 1/8 of an inch less than. Because when you make a bracelet and it's too tight and the customer can't get it on or you can't get it on, that's bad. But if it's a little loose, no problem. But see, now we got it set up. Now we would start weaving. Now, with that said, thank you for watching. Like I said, I talk, but I try to explain not only how I'm doing it, but why I'm doing it. Like I said, check out the other videos in this playlist, tips and tricks. And for the other core strand setups, check out the other videos in the core strand playlist. But with that, thank you. And remember, neat, clean, and tight. Happy weaving.